So all I've done so far off camera is isolate where the wires have got to go. So I know this bunch of wires here pairs up to these two. So I've got the connectors and everything there. I'm going to have to shorten the wires just a tad. The wires are going to have to poke through this section here. So what I'll do is I'll cut like a little, I guess almost a round hole so that I can put a grommet in there. Probably like a half round hole, and then, you know, punch the wires through that way with a nice rubber grommet to protect them. Obviously this will be all bunched together and loomed up. I had the old school 30 amp fuse and it just had all the other stuff attached to it, so I just swapped it out with this guy here that I had in the box. The actual flasher relay, I worked out that I could still put it in the box. The wires are long enough, but where a nice little home was just up here underneath the tank. There's another little component in there anyway, so I figured that would be a nice little spot for it. It shouldn't get too hot. I'll monitor that anyway and just have a bit of a, you know, I think it will work well. After the wiring goes up here, I could still cover this with something if I think it's going to be an issue. But for now, that's where that's going to live. So what you just saw me do is just welding a little shelf. It's just so that the wires aren't going to be sitting on top of this edge here and then causing the vibration, and everything might actually cut through the insulation and then into the actual wires, causing a short or worse. So that's what I've done. I want it to look like it came from factory like this, that's why I went to that extent, but you don't have to go to that extent. Just something simple like a piece of pipe I wrapped around the actual loom would work, steel pipe or something like that. Could do the same job, but like I said, I just wanted to make it look pretty presentable so that when this actually comes out, it's all part of the actual electric tray. Another thing that I didn't mention, or maybe I have, I've got a hole at the lowest point of this electric tray, so if any moisture does get in there, because it's a sealed box, so if any moisture or water gets in there, it's always going to be able to drain. So I have mentioned this before on the channel, and I learnt the hard way. So if you're going to cut a thread like this, make sure you always put two nuts on like this, tighten the one on the other, and then cut straight across that nut. The reason being is because if you don't put that on there and you try and cut it, chances are you're not going to be able to cut this straight, and then trying to get a nut on is just going to be a pain in the butt. So like I said, learnt the hard way, but hopefully that helps you if you do decide to cut a thread or a bolt or anything like that. Just make sure you put two nuts on, cut it nice and flush across there, and then you know that once you take that nut off, it's going to actually come off, and then you're going to be able to put another one back on. bring to your attention this dual wall heat shrink. It shrinks down 4 times its actual size, so a lot more than the standard stuff. It is a little bit thicker, but it has a glue on the inside which seals the area. So if you've got something that is in the open, like I guess this, and it's not in its own loom, then it's going to seal that wire, and it's obviously not going to get any moisture or any, it's not going to corrode basically. So it's really good stuff for that. I don't use it for everything. I do have the other heat shrink as well, which I'll use if it's put into a loom. This stuff, like I said, will add a lot more thickness to that area. So if I've got about 10 wires or 5 wires in one area, I'll use the other stuff because the whole thing is going to be wrapped up in a loom anyway and it shouldn't move. So just thought I'd bring it up and show you in the video because not everybody knows about this stuff, and it is really, really handy if you want to, obviously do this kind of stuff. Just a couple of things that I still need to address is obviously protecting these. I've got to put a rubber boot on them as well as the one on the positive here. The actual locating tabs that I've put in here, I've made them with a little bit of room, so there's a little bit of wiggle room this way as well as that way. I still need to strap it to make sure it's going to stay in place. And also with these guys here, what I plan to do is get in a bike tube and just slide in a bike tube over the top of it and just cut it flush across the top, and that'll protect this from obviously rubbing on the actual battery. I'm going to put a little bit of foam at the back and a foam on the bottom, and that'll really just keep that nice and firm in there, and then the strap will hold it in place. So that's the plan with that. I've still got to obviously finish off the wiring, but that's just something I thought I'd explain. So what I've done at the back here is pretty much just, these are the wires that go straight to the tail light. So they're going to be all run out one side here like that. These guys here are pretty much for the indicators. I've kept them as factory as I can so that if I ever need to change out the indicators, I can just disconnect them here. This is just wrapped together, so I can unwrap that and then basically just remove one of the indicators if one breaks, or if I want to change them out or whatever. So rather than having to unsolder and resolder anything, you just try and keep it so that they're unpluggable, if that makes sense. With everything else, I pretty much just got to make an earth. This bunch of wires here, as well as the battery, needs an earth. So I'm going to use probably this one here, maybe back here. I'm even thinking about putting a bolt straight through there, and that can be the earth for it. I could use one of the mounting points for this bracket here, but I think having its own earth right here, and I'll drill a hole, and then that can be the earth for not only this, but as well as the battery. So I think that's the best bet. I think that's the best way to do it, just have all the wires running on one side like that. The only wire that's pretty much on this side is the rear brake. So I need to have that running down that side because it's obviously, that's where it is. So that's pretty much the only wire apart from, obviously the blinker that goes on that side. But I'll make a little mounting here so that this is all nice and neat and it locks in place. I might even get some plastic sleeving a little bit bigger than this and just wrap pretty much this over here and anywhere where there's going to be something might be rubbing, just to protect it as best I can. Same thing with the brake switch wires. So the tank is on, which means it's the moment of truth. Everything is where it needs to be. In fact, I just need to put some insulation on these guys, tidy that little area up. The actual bracket for this is missing, so I've got to obviously fabricate a bracket to hold that in place. This blue wire is just an earth. It's actually the regulator rectifier under there, so I've just got to obviously find an earth for that. But apart from that, it's all pretty much ready to go. So I'm just going to power up and turn the key on and just see if everything's working right now.